Hello again. Thank you so much for continuing this journey with me. In this episode, I'm going to talk more about the ketone levels of our blood. Before I begin, though, I want to remind you I'm not a doctor, a physician, a scientist, medical professional of any kind. I'm just a person that's been through a really rough time with weight gain and blood labs, and I try to explain a lot of very complicated functions and signals and things in our body, but I use my own crayon simple terms to describe these things as best I can from the way that I've understood some very complicated writings by some well-known scientists. So also, before I go any further, please let me remind you, if you want to start on any new eating program or any new exercise program, please check with your doctor. So in my previous episodes, I talked about blood insulin levels, and I also talked about blood ketone levels. But I wanted to go into that more because that was such an important point to me, and that's where I finally understood what I had to do to really lose weight. So after you stop eating, we'll call it fasting. After you stop eating at any particular point in time, you stop eating, your blood glucose and your blood insulin levels begin to decrease, just along a time axis. But how long that takes for your blood insulin and blood glucose level to decrease depends on your own level of insulin resistance. And please note that in this chart, I talk about both blood glucose and blood insulin, because it is very possible for persons such as I was, who was very insulin resistant, for the body's glucose levels to go down, but the insulin levels to still remain high. And that was the problem that I had, and that I had an awful time trying to figure out, because I didn't get the right direction that I needed from the doctors that I consulted. So over time, your blood ketone levels will begin to be produced. So the body's liver begins to produce ketones as the blood glucose levels begin to be depleted. So in this chart, you see from the time that you stop eating, at some point in time, your liver begins to produce ketones. But the blood ketone level, in order to actually lose weight, the blood ketone level has to be higher than the blood insulin level. So you have to reach an inflection point such as this, where the ketone levels are higher than both the blood glucose and the blood insulin. Very important, not just higher than the blood glucose. The ketone level has to be higher than both the blood insulin and the blood glucose. It's right here that your body goes into the state of ketosis. So at that state where the ketones are higher in the blood than the blood insulin and the blood glucose, that's the state that they call ketosis. And that's the state at that point where the body can actually hear the ketones. The ketones signal the rest of the body to release the fat from the fat cells and burn the fat for the energy that our body needs. So that's what we want, right? Absolutely. That's exactly what we want. But in order to do that, remember, you have to get the blood insulin levels down, not just the blood glucose. So some of you out there who are familiar with all the different diets that are out there are probably thinking, well, Marilyn, that's what a keto diet does, right? It gets you into ketosis. Well, you're sort of right. But remember that a standard keto diet reduces the insulin levels by a very high fat and very high protein diet. So if you'll remember from an earlier episode, I mentioned that in Dr. Fung's book, he explains that almost everything we eat, with the exception of healthy fats and green leafy vegetables, triggers an insulin response, even protein. So protein triggers an insulin response. If you're someone like I was, who was highly insulin resistant, then eating protein and triggering insulin response will never allow me to get below to the point where my ketosis, the ketones are higher than my blood insulin. So in order to lose weight, I had to reduce the insulin level, and in order to reduce the insulin level in my blood, I had to cut out protein. It was extremely interesting to me, and as a matter of fact, that in one of Dr. Gundry's his books or one of his podcasts, I'm sorry, I can't remember which, he mentioned Dr. Atkins, who was a very famous doctor who wrote a number of diet books, and he had a diet called the Dr. Atkins diet. He was an early proponent of low-carb diets, and his diet was basically high protein, high fat. You could eat all the eggs and bacon and whatnot you wanted and lose weight. Dr. Gundry mentioned that Dr. Atkins died at 72, an obese person. So he had stayed on his diet. He didn't know why it wasn't working anymore. He gained a ton of weight because he was eating a lot of protein. So high protein, high fat diets may work in the beginning for some people, but they don't necessarily work forever. So I didn't want to go the way of Dr. Atkins, bless his heart. So I wanted to lose weight. I did want to reach the state of ketosis, but I did not want to eat protein to trigger high insulin. So it's not that I never want to eat protein, but in order to lose weight, you have to get to the state of ketosis, and you don't necessarily want to stay in ketosis all your life. You don't want to stay in ketosis 24 hours, 365 days a year. That's not necessarily a good thing. But Dr. Fung talks about in his book, The Obesity Code, many of his patients had great success doing things like 36-hour fasts because it takes time on this chart. This chart, the time that it takes for a person from the time that they begin to fast until the time that they reach this inflection point, it is different for everybody. And in some people who are not insulin resistant, reaching this point may only take 12 hours or maybe even less. But for someone like me, reaching this point, because I was very insulin resistant, I had a lot of insulin in my blood, it takes a very long period of time. So after I had, in one of my earlier episodes, I mentioned that I tried the Dr. Gundry's teardown menu. Dr. Gundry's teardown menu is a lot of vegetables, green leafy vegetables, a lot of vegetables of all kinds, and healthy fats, and some protein, some animal protein. And it worked great for me in the beginning, but at some point I reached a plateau. And when I reached the plateau, I went more towards what Dr. Longo talks about in his fasting-mimicking diet, which is to reduce the protein and eat a lot of green leafy vegetables and healthy fats. And at some point, I actually did start doing the fasting-mimicking diet by Dr. Longo, which is a total of 800 calories a day, being 400 calories of healthy fats like olive oil, avocado, nuts, and another 400 calories of leafy green non-starchy vegetables. You can eat a lot of non-starchy leafy green vegetables and not get to 400 calories. So you feel like you're eating, you can feel full, but you can lose weight like crazy. And the first time I did that, I stayed on it for 21 days. Dr. Longo only recommends doing it for, I think it's 4 days. But I stayed on it because I felt so good. I was losing weight. It was an incredible experience for me. But it wasn't until I eventually discovered Dr. Fung and his book, The Obesity Code, that I understood why it worked. And it was in Dr. Fung's book that I saw a chart similar to the one that I just showed you that explained that it takes time and to reach that inflection point. It explained to me, it made me understand why in earlier times when I had tried intermittent fasting, that intermittent fasting hadn't worked. It's not that intermittent fasting doesn't work, it works. For people who are not insulin resistant, they can fast for 12 hours or 14 hours or 16 hours or 18 hours or whatever it is. Their body reaches ketosis, they stay in the ketosis for a few hours, and then they eat. It's a great plan. But for me, I didn't reach that ketosis point because I had so much insulin in my body. I had to deplete it before I would begin to lose weight. So doing the fasting mimicking diet, I did that. I reached that ketosis stage. But at the time, I didn't understand. I didn't understand why, what it was I needed to do. And Dr. Fung's book, The Obesity Code, was the one that explained that point, and that was such an important point, and that's why I wanted to go into it deeper here with you. So after I understood why I was losing weight under the Dr. Longo's fasting mimicking diet, and I also tried Dr. Fung's water-only fasting, and that worked really well, and it really wasn't hard at all for me to do. And maybe it was because I'd been through the fasting mimicking diet and I'd gotten used to not eating so much and eating in a good way. And the water only fasts, and it's not just really water only, you can drink coffee and tea and some other things too, but you have to, it's so easy. You don't have to think, you don't have to count calories, you don't have to think about it. And that's why Dr. Fung likes water only. It's just really, really simple. And he doesn't recommend that you do it for long periods of time. He had a lot of patients that were very successful doing, say, for example, a 36-hour fast. 36 hours is really not too long when you think about it. If you stop eating, say, at 6 o'clock at night, then you're going to sleep overnight. The next day at 6 p.m., you've already done 24 hours, and another night until 6 a.m. the following morning, and bingo, you've got 36 hours. That's not really very long. And your blood, your body will burn the fat as long as the insulin levels are low. So it doesn't matter whether you're awake or sleeping. So that's a 36-hour fast, and bingo, you've got it. Really not hard at all. And so his patients would do a 36-hour fast. Some of them would do, for example, like once a week. They would do a 36-hour fast every week for many months, and they would lose the weight they wanted. So fasting, whether you do fasting mimicking or whether you do a water-only fast, has tremendous benefits. And we'll talk about those more in future episodes. But one of the benefits is that fasting resets your metabolism, and it resets this whole issue of insulin resistance. So little by little, I have become less insulin resistant. I believe I am still insulin resistant because I don't switch over after 12 hours of fasting to ketosis, but I'm way, way better than what I was when I started. So there's a lot of improvement, whether you go fasting mimicking or even if you just do what I said with Dr. Gundry's approach with a teardown menu, but don't eat protein every day. Protein is good, and I mentioned, even Dr. Longo said, for older folks like I am, you need to get some protein, but there are benefits to fasting, so you don't want to do it every day. You don't want to be in ketosis 24 hours, 365 days a year. You don't want to do that. You want to eat regularly, but if you do intermittent fasting, that you have to do it for long enough that your body reaches ketosis, and then you want to stay in ketosis for, at least a few hours so you have a chance to burn some fat. So that's sort of the approach that I've been taking, and I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope you've learned something from it, and if you have learned something from it, I hope you'll hit the like button, and if you haven't already done so, I hope you'll subscribe, and I hope to see you in future sessions. Until next time, bye-bye.